Hi, welcome back. This is another Intentional Success webinar series. We're going to talk about feast or famine. Which 2021 are you planning for? Today's a discussion about strategy. And as you guys know, I think strategy is extremely important. I may not be a big fan of SWOT analyses, but I am a big fan of the strategic thinking. And so we're going to do a little bit of that today. For those of you who are new, and we always have new folks, and thank you and welcome. Appreciate you being here. I'm Tom Stimson. I'm founder of the Stimson Group. I put out the Intentional Success newsletter. I have the Intentional Success online community. I've put on Jumpstart workshops. The AV Matters brand newsletter and website are mine as well. I've been working with companies since 2006. I've directly consulted and advised several hundred companies. And of course, I've helped thousands of folks, and even more so this year with my content and my teachings and webinars. So thank you guys for being here. You're why I do this. General reminder, of course, we are recording. This will be available later as it always is. You'll get an email later tonight, I think, that reminds you of where to find the replay page, which is the same link as last time, but I'll update it with the new video. And Q&A box. If you've got questions that you would like answers or would like me to discuss or talk about something, please put it in the Q&A box. I'm open to anything. I'll respond to whatever. We have Q&A time at the end. Of course, there's the chat. Chat is fun. Say hello to the other folks on there. Introduce yourself. Let us know where you're hailing from. We do get people from all over the world, and that's always fun and exciting. But let us know who you are and where you're calling from. So this webinar, why are we going to talk about strategy? It's November. Why are we talking about strategy? Why aren't we talking business planning? Well, because it's 2020 and it's really that kind of a year, right? We're not doing things the way that we normally do them. So we're going to be talking strategy pretty continually for the months to come because everything is changing in front of us. And that's the nature of strategy. Okay, strategic thinking helps us engineer the things that we want to happen based on what we think will happen. So we're always looking around the corner. We're always looking ahead and seeing what is out there and basing our planning on what we think is going to happen. Now, sometimes what's happening out there in the real world is not what we want to happen. So our engineering becomes more urgent. We're going to have to work a little bit harder to get what we want out of it based on the trends that we're seeing. And that's kind of what we're in the middle of right now. So engineering what you want to happen. It's okay to want things. As a matter of fact, you can't do a strategy without goals, right? So we've got to have a goal. But first, before you can have a goal, you got to have some reality. You have to have some understanding for yourself of where you think things are going, whatever things are, the economy, the business, the industry, whatever it might be, because that affects your business strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I've got to go backwards a little bit because I want to recap 2020 because strategic thinking has been affected by everything that we've been through. But I also want to set us up for what we have going forward because I am going to tell you what I think is going to happen. And you can weave that in with what you think is going to happen. And then I'm going to give you some tips about how to apply that and what things to focus on for the next year and certainly for the next 6 months at a minimum while things are evolving. So quick recap on 2020, like anybody wants to relive any of this. Okay, January, February, barely, we started to hear about a virus, didn't know we were going to be affected by it really probably until February. Most of us weren't really aware of it until March 2020, when it started to manifest and we started seeing cancellations. And at that time, we were expecting in late March, early April, maybe a 4-week shutdown. Different parts of the country were already doing some lockdowns and some stay-at-home orders. And we thought that would all be over by the end of April, maybe end of May. In April, we realized that it might be a little bit longer. Our drop in revenue was much more severe. The cancellations were much farther out. We thought we would have business in May and June, and those started to cancel as well. And at that time, I started predicting that you wouldn't have any real significant revenue until August based on what we were seeing, what the trends that we were seeing. So I made recommendations about what you should do in anticipation of that. Little did we know then that that wasn't going to be far enough out. So in May, we started talking about maybe pivoting a little bit, maybe adding some streaming capabilities to your event business. We started building studios in our warehouses, and go back and look at those photographs, because compare them to what you have now, and they were rough, right? June, we started having conversations about the furloughs maybe being permanent. But here in the US, we were all muddied up in this PPP program where we had to keep people on so that we could pay them PPP money, but we had them on furlough. It was all very, very confusing. But we realized that once our PPP money, once our government subsidy ran out in the US, that we were probably going to have to do permanent layoffs with these folks, or at least a permanent furlough. In July, while we'd had some events, we'd had some graduations, we'd had a few drive-in, this and that, we started to see some larger one-off events with pretty mixed results. The margins were really low. They were priced very low. Nobody was spending any money, but we did do some pretty good sized outdoor graduations and other outdoor events in the areas of the country where you could do those things. And by August, streaming events, particularly for corporate work, but soon for the nonprofit work, started to pick up a little bit, because they needed to talk to people. They needed to communicate stuff. They needed to push plans out and engage people. And so these meetings became more and more important. Now, by September of 2020, we had been saying maybe Q4, we would start seeing some hybrid events. By September of 2020, it was very clear, maybe in mid-August, that there were going to be no in-person events through the end of the year. And while there have been small exceptions, and there have been some studio audiences and this and that, and everybody cites the cheerleading convention that happened in Orlando way back at the beginning of the summer, before all the college and high school students were sick with COVID. None of that really matters. There are no real significant events going on right now. Everything is an exception. It's an outlier. So in October, we started looking back and seeing how well we were doing. I've reviewed a lot of August financials with my clients. Those turned out to be some pretty good months. And if you ignore the fact that overheads were still very high, the direct costs on streaming events were actually very, very low. And so these were very profitable events. Studio rentals were very profitable. Streaming support, Zoom support, platform-based meetings were all very, very profitable if well managed. Now, here we are in November, and we're now hearing rumors of a vaccine. There's a couple of potential vaccines that might start to ship or be administered in the next couple of months. But here's the thing. Not even a vaccine launched today is going to save the live events industry for 2021. And I'll talk about that coming up next in my predictions. So there we are. We started with some short-term concerns. Our concerns got longer and longer and longer term. Our accommodations started to be pivots. We were trying things, and now we're sticking with them. We're doing a lot of different things. And the honest truth is, many people are doing well at this. I speak to quite a few of you. You're surviving. You're still there. I do deal with bankruptcies. I have dealt with companies that have had to shut down and liquidate, but it's surprisingly few compared to the number of people who are figuring out how they're going to survive all of this, and they're doing it. And that's exciting. That's very heartening. That's that resilience that comes from people who do live events for a living is what's at play here. So let's keep at it, but let's be realistic about it. So back to the strategy. I'm going to give you my predictions for 2021. They're not going to make 90% of you happy. Some of you are more pessimistic than I am, but I'm basing this on the same kind of forecasting that I used back at the beginning of all of this, and as I've updated it through the time of how long it's going to take for our audiences or our customers' audiences to regain the confidence to walk into the ballroom, the convention center, the trade show floor, that will allow us to go back to doing business as normal. You ready? All right. Fasten your seatbelts. Drink if you've got it. I don't believe that we're going to have enough confidence for in-person events at all in 2021. If we started today with mask compliance and distancing compliance and everybody behaved, we're going to be looking at a pretty decent 2022. But the fact is, we have half in the US, we have half the country that doesn't want to comply with this. They're tired of it. They don't think it's worth the effort. They're not in our industry. I think generally in our industry, most of us understand how important it is because we are directly affected. But we are being held back by people who don't understand all of this or don't want to believe all of this for whatever reason. Now, if we have a limited vaccine rollout, realistically, they can promise all they want. It's going to take 12 to 18 months to administer. And to get to the level of administration where we have 60 or 70% of the people have been inoculated, which is going to boost the confidence of the people who want to go back into events. We'll have some increase in confidence in the first 3 to 6 months of a vaccine, but not the wave of confidence that we're all hoping for. So let's be realistic what a vaccine will mean for us. It's great news for restaurants. Restaurants, 6 months after a vaccine, they should be able to have higher capacity in their businesses again. And because they've worked hard on reducing their overhead as best you can in the restaurant industry, restaurants will do well. And I talk about restaurants a lot because they have a very parallel path to what we've been going through. So a lot of their experience has been the same experience that we've had in terms of timing and the effect of this. Matter of fact, the entire hospitality industry, airlines, hotels, restaurants, and then of course all the venues and of course all the people who support that, we all share a very similar story. Now, rapid testing is very sporadically available. It is coming out. There are better tests. There are event promoters that are going to use rapid testing to admit people on the day of the event and things like that. Airports are putting rapid testing in so that you can be tested, get a certificate, get on the airplane and present that on the other side, wherever it is that you're going. There are limitations to the value of this because all it means is that you aren't showing signs of infection at the time you were tested. And we know that you need a couple of tests over several days period. So I'm excited about the potential of rapid testing. It'll improve our live audience options, but it will be more effective and it will not negate the need for mask compliance and distancing compliance. So the combination of those things, if everything happened together, our timeline will accelerate much, much more quickly. So if you advocate for anything, advocate for that, because that will probably have the most positive impact on our legacy businesses. More predictions. Many of you have avoided consumer business. Not, if you're in the rental business, you probably had a consumer business, an end user business. But if you're in shows, you probably didn't do a lot of that. But streaming opportunities are creating a new B2C, business to consumer segment that is relevant for our industry. We're seeing this in the other hospitality sectors where they're going to deal more and more with end customers and end users and individuals. They're going to be more willing to sell to them because of all their excess capacity. I think there's good money to be made here. I think there's a great opportunity here for people who want to do that kind of business. It's a different personality. It's a different sales process. It's a different marketing process. Your products are going to differ. But I think there's going to be a lot of demand there if that's something that you're looking at. Now, the B2B side of our industry, you people doing business with each other, is already growing in demand. I talk with many business owners and I'm connecting people who are hiring each other to take on bits of jobs and even entire jobs to help them out. What used to be the equipment sub-rental market is now the studio sub-rental market, including some turnkey jobs. Now, starting April of next year, and we saw a reasonable amount of success with outdoor events this summer, Of course, south of the equator, your summer is starting now. I think outdoor events are going to soar. I think a lot of the pent up demand is going to go throughout go outdoors. And we saw a lot of this in the election campaigns here in the U.S., where most campaign events were out of doors, and people attended. And you can manage a crowd, and you can manage distancing if that's what you want to do. Though, of course, there were a lot of non-distance outdoor events. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying between graduations and worship services and even corporate events, we can do a lot of stuff outdoors, and you should invest in some outdoor capacity, or at least adjust your mindset that you can do more stuff outdoors. Now, based on what I think is going to happen in 2021, I think 2022 is going to look much the same. But let me make a few more predictions before we look that far into the future. Demand for and acceptance of virtual audience is going to soar. It's already increasing dramatically. We're getting better. We're just getting, everybody but me is getting better at doing webinars. The platform-based services are improving. The audience engagement is improving. All those disasters that we had, in June, May, June, and July of this year, those are ancient histories. What we're doing now is much, much more sophisticated. We are learning really fast. We're really smart people. We're very resilient, and we're applying that knowledge. And being successful at it, we're going to see more demand. More corporations are going to be comfortable with doing this. More selling organizations, direct selling in particular, is going to be comfortable doing this because it gets them the audience that they need to have. Now, studio audiences are going to drive this hybrid model. Many of you are talking about hybrid. You're excited that we're going to have that traditional meeting. It might be smaller, but we'll also stream it. I want to reverse that for you. You're going to do your traditional streaming model, and there might be an audience, because the streaming audience, the remote audience, is always going to be more important than the studio audience. And if you've ever been to a taping of a television show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right. You're a tool, you're a prop when you're in the audience. And that's how we're going to see hybrid manifest. We're going to have small local audiences. There's things we can do to make it fun and exciting for them. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's that much, much larger streaming audience that we're playing to. Remote audience is going to remain the highest priority at least through 2023. Even when we're back into doing primarily in-person events, we're still going to have a very strong demand for remote audiences. We've gotten suddenly very global with our meetings. That's not going to go away. The practicality of having a bigger audience, particularly a paying audience, is not going to go away. People who are producing these events, are funding these events, are looking at the cost and the return and going, I need and want that remote audience. The very, very good return. So that's going to stay. I can't look much past 2023. A lot of things can happen between now and then. But based on the track that we're on, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm predicting. Now, you can do whatever you want with these predictions. You can disagree with me, and that's fine. You can send me hate mail. You can send me accolades. It doesn't matter. You have to make your own predictions. Okay? And that is a very important aspect of strategy. No one else can tell you what's going to happen. You have to decide for yourself. You can take information from people like me. You can do your own study. You can talk to each other, and you can form your own idea and your own timeline. My point is, that's exactly what you have to do. Now, I'm living this every day. I'm looking for this information. I'm constantly modifying it. One, I need to modify my business, but two, I need to help you modify your businesses. And I need to give you the best recommendations I can give you. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious and conservative about timelines, because that is my nature. But once I'm sure about something, I can be very aggressive about where we're going after that. So make your own predictions. What you believe will happen is what matters most. There. Now, let's talk about business strategy. I just want to, once again, separate strategy from tactics for you. Rental, equipment rental, for instance, is a business strategy. I buy something, I rent it to people, they give it back, they give me money. It's awesome. A specific type of rental is a tactic. So as a business owner, many of you have told me how much you are immersed in the rental industry, that you consider yourself a rental business, and you can't understand or don't want to embrace the service opportunities that are out there. And that's fine. I get that. If your business strategy is rental, find something else to rent. Find something that needs to be rented and rent it, and you'll be in the rental business. But if your business is lighting rental and you've chosen a tactic over a strategy, then you need to find something that needs to be lit. Okay. Lighting services can also be a tactic. So it doesn't have to be tied to hardware. So think about what your strategy is and what the tactics you're going to employ are. And before anybody asks, but you're free to post any questions you want in the Q&A. Okay. We need to talk about sunk costs, because there's 100+ people on this call right now. You probably represent $100 million worth of an inventory that's sitting idle and collecting dust. Okay. Rental inventory, by definition, is a sunk cost. And a sunk cost refers to money that has already been spent and it can't be recovered. You bought the gear, it's there. That is a sunk cost. Now, your ability to utilize an asset is strategy. Okay? When we're looking to the future, when we're trying to figure out how we're going to be successful based on what we know, strategy, engineer what we want to happen based on what we think will happen. Okay? The fact that we have a sunk cost, those costs are excluded from future business. Now, you've got carrying costs for those things. I've got a warehouse. That's overhead. I'm making payments. That's overhead. Okay. We exclude the sunk costs from future decisions because the cost remains the same regardless of the outcome of the decision. And since I cannot create business for AV rental equipment, for instance, I can't fabricate business. If we took all the demand in the world and consolidated on one or two of you, we might use up your inventory. That's a sunk cost. That doesn't mean that we can't move forward and be successful. That doesn't mean that you just needed to throw it all in the dumpster. Okay? Think objectively about this. We have avenues. And not all of you are in the rental business, but you have other assets. You have other things. You have software that you've paid for. You've got training that you've taken. There's lots of things that you've done that don't matter anymore, and they were sunk costs. But strategy is about looking forward. So I'm going to give you 3 generic strategies to exercise in the recovery if you're in the rental business or really any business at all. 3 strategies are this. 1, wait. Waiting is a strategy. It's not a great one, okay? But it may be what you want to do. If you want to wait until the business that you're used to or comfortable with comes back, then make that decision and do it. Minimize your costs. Try to stay relevant, try and capture whatever revenue you can. In other words, you have to keep running a business. You can't just shut down and hide, because then you're not going to remain relevant and somebody else is going to take your market share. But there is a way to do this, and your strategy can be wait. Okay, but we can wait smartly. Okay. Another strategy, generic strategy, is take advantage of the streaming and production demand that is going on out there and add something that supports it. You don't have to be the primary contractor. You don't have to be the company that's providing the streaming or the production services. You can be the B2B company that is supporting those companies with whatever products and services that you have. Okay? You may have an existing front. You may have an old front that's still out there that you can wait on, but you can add skills, you can add talents, you can promote yourself differently and try and use the resources that you have. Now, you could be working multiple fronts. And the typical scenario I see in this is many of you are, if you're AV rental and staging companies, production rental companies, concert lighting, touring, whatever, you also have a sales and installation division, which has not been dramatically affected. There's been a little bit of a downturn, but not a significant downturn in that. And it's certainly with all the retrofits to accommodate streaming and remote workers, it's gotten a little bit better. So there is good installation work out there. Maybe you're a staffing business and you're doing services somewhere. Okay? Maybe you're doing it in a different sector. Maybe your computer rental business is really taking off because IT services are really big, but your projector rental business is dead in the water. So you can have multiple fronts going on. Look at what's happening in streaming and production and see where you can direct some of your energy and resources there. Now, the third generic strategy is the pivot. And for many of you, that's a horrible word. You're scared to death of it. You're thinking about all the things that you've done in the past, all the sunk costs, and a pivot seems like you're abandoning all that. However, a pivot is a very viable strategy. Probably for the first time in, I think probably since the early 90s, the late 80s, has a pivot actually made sense. So pivoting to being the provider of streaming and production is certainly something many of you considered. Many of you have made that decision and you've made it your lead service. And what I mean by that is, if that is your lead service, then that rental business you used to have has a strategy of waiting, right? That installation and sales business is continuing business as usual, and you're effectively adding a third line of business, which is the streaming and production services. The mistake that I'm seeing too many companies make is they're bringing in the streaming and production pivot underneath a dormant business, underneath their rental infrastructure. Pivot to streaming and production isn't a bolt-on to rental. They are completely different businesses. So when you're looking at strategy, okay, look for a clear lane. Look for something that will allow you to move forward rapidly and not be anchored into the past or anchored into a business model, processes, or infrastructure or overhead of the past. Longer discussion. You guys know how to reach me. I'd be happy to have that with you. Now, I want to take you on a journey into 2021. I want to make my strategic recommendations for 2021. Here are the business strategies I think you need to pay attention to get through this coming year. Next month, and I'll say this again at the end of the webinar, I'm going to talk more about tactics. This month, I'm going to talk about strategies. Let's get our strategies sorted out. Then we can debate the tactics that are involved with it. So whatever your strategy, if you're any of these three generic strategies or anything else in this space, if you're part of my audience, I think every single strategy on here matters. You ready? Number one, I think there's 10 of these. Stay nimble. Do resist every urge you have to rebuild your infrastructure. You're supposed to run out of capacity. You see busy months coming up. You've got operations staff that are pressuring you to hire people back. You're trying to bring people back in to spread the work out. Don't do it. You're making yourself slow again. Okay. You're supposed to run out of capacity. Sometimes you're going to have to say no, but if you're nimble, you will find ways to do it. Focus on the nimble side of your business. You'll be better for it. These are in no particular order, but I do think this one is very, very important. So I'm glad it's at the top of the list. Use dynamic pricing. A lot of the things I'm going to tell you are things I've been telling you for years, because this is where we were going. Well, guess what? We're here. The pandemic, if there's a silver lining in the pandemic, is that it has forced us to fast forward 5 years into the future and adapt everything all at once. One of the things that you need to adapt urgently is dynamic pricing, because in order to stay nimble, you need to run out of capacity. And if you're out of capacity, your price just went up. That's the way it works. Okay. Use demand pricing. If your demand is high, your pricing needs to go up. You need to capture that profit margin when it's available. You need to think like a hotel. You need to think like an airline, and try and recover that business. It's okay to run out of capacity. Trust me, our industry is going to be running out of capacity. This is in your favor. Clients aren't going to continue to call the shots on pricing, okay, because we're in a very new business, right? There is a limited amount of capacity out there. Your pricing can go up. So start leveraging that now. Don't stop marketing. Just don't do it. You have a story. Continue to tell it. It's even more important now because you're in new territory. You're in a different business. You have different customers. Most of the people who have told me that 50% or more of the business they're doing in streaming events are people they've never done business with before. That for live events staging companies, only a very small portion of their former customers have any access to the work. Your channels are changing. You've got to market. The better you are at marketing, the faster you can develop those channels, the faster you can develop trust and credibility with the people who are looking at you, the faster you can close a deal. Customer needs. Ooh. Being platform agnostic seems like a really safe move. When you're looking at streaming platforms, say, well, we're happy to work with any platform that you, Mr. Customer, want to engage in. We'll support you. Being platform agnostic is not supportive. People are going to come to you because you're the expert and you need to act like it. Now, I think it's okay to say, hey, if you've got a platform, we're happy to work with you. Here's the platform we recommend. We're happy to work with your platform. There's lots of ways around this. My point in all of this is you need to focus on your customer needs. Your customers need experts. They need advice. They don't need questions. If I hear one more person say, I'm very frustrated because customers don't know what they want. And they're not supposed to know. That's why they're calling you. Make recommendations. Don't make accommodations. I've reviewed quite a few proposals lately, and there's a lot of accommodations being made in there. You need to make stronger choices for your customers. They came to you for a reason. Don't disappoint them by giving them options that don't mean anything to them. Tell them what the right thing to do is and stand behind it. And I think you'll be surprised at the amount of success you'll have doing that. In 2021, you need to continue to hire sparingly. I am not an advocate of bringing back full-time employees at this time. Look at the talent that you have. You need to hire talent, not capacity. If you're having capacity issues because you're too busy, you need to outsource. Okay. The reason we hire people full-time is because we need that specific talent and that we have a lot of demand for that talent. A lot of the talent that we need right now are not the people that we furloughed 6 months ago. And I'm sorry about that. However, there's a place for those people in the gig economy, which is why you would hire, was where you go when you have capacity issues. So not surprisingly, in 2021, you need to help, every one of you needs to help build the gig economy. It's going to save your business. It is going to save our industry. And I don't care which side of the transaction you're on. If you're the gigger, I used to gig. I guess I'm technically a gigger now. If you gig, okay, this is going to save your career. If you run a business, the gig economy is going to save your business. We're going to need to pay better in order to get better people. And if we want to keep good workers in our industry, if you're lamenting the people that you had to furlough and you're afraid they're going to go off into another industry, the gig economy is what's going to save them. Gig workers are not the enemy. They are your lifeline. And you need gig workers more than they need you because they can get work in other places. And a note to gig workers, think about your channel. Most of the people that you're doing with who are on this webinar are resellers. They're reselling your service. They're reselling something that you do inside of whatever they have sold. You need to pick rates and stick with it for them. Give them lots of notice if you're going to raise your rates. You don't get the luxury in your channel to do dynamic pricing. You do get that luxury if you have end customers and you have corporate clients that are coming directly to you, in which case use that dynamic pricing to your advantage. But for your channel partners, like live event companies and streaming companies, platform companies, you need to figure out what your rate is with them. You need to work out a deal and stick with it. That's what's going to make this gig economy work. I don't know why I have to say this, but I do need to say it. Expect to make money in 2021. Do not settle for breaking even. Do not say, oh, Tom says it's going to be another year or two. We're just going to have to muddy along, and I'm going to try and keep these people around, and we're going to keep paying for that oversized warehouse. And oh, I'm going to keep these 4 trucks even though we're only using one at a time. No. Expect to make money. Reduce your overhead as aggressively as you can. And if you think you've done all you can, then you need to do more. Okay? You need to increase your gross profit. When you sell something, you need to expect to make more money. Okay? You need to be shooting for 50% gross profit on everything you're doing right now. You need to be expanding your market share. All of these things are going to help you make more money. Be aggressive about it. Okay? Don't play around. Okay? 2021 can be a great year for you if you will focus on these things and don't settle for just getting by. And part of doing that, and I'm speaking primarily to owners and senior managers, managing directors, is to stay out of the weeds. Okay. If you're running the business, if you're where the buck stops, you have 3 priorities right now: reduce your overhead, increase your gross profit, expand your market share. Maybe 4 things: keep a talented team together and supported. Right? Stay out of the weeds. One of the, I had a conversation with a managing director, CEO client of mine who was having trouble getting sales forecasts out of his organization, which is understandable considering how little we understand about what's ahead of us. And it was on his goals list to get that sales forecast sorted out. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? And everything he described to me was his sales manager doing it. And my response to him was, if this is your sales manager's job, then it is his goal to get a sales forecast, not your goal. So that's what I call staying out of the weeds. If you're in the weeds, it's because you've taken somebody else's goal and made it your own. Okay? You have the goal in the right person's hands. He's your sales manager. You need to hold him to that job. You need to hold him accountable for that goal. But that's not your goal. That's part of his job. Your goal is reducing overhead, increasing gross profit, expanding the market share, building a talent base. Okay? He or she needs to get you the forecast numbers that you need. Stay out of the weeds. If you need help getting coached on how to do this, you know how to find me. Save cash. Never, ever again should you find yourself where you found yourself in March, which is strapped for cash, living off of deposits, kicking the can down the road, no money to cover operating overhead, waiting for a handout from the government. This is not the last crisis of your career. Okay? Save cash. Build a longer runway than you think you will ever need. Okay? Dip into that runway very carefully and very strategically with your eyes wide open. Okay? But aggressively build a longer runway. If you're a freelancer, you need to do everything you can to reduce your overhead if your revenue is down so that you can sock away money. The hardest thing for me in all of this is figuring out how to save money when my revenue has dropped so dramatically. But in order to build that runway that gives me the flexibility to make the strategic choices that I make and decisions I need to make, I need that runway. So I'll back on the runway thing. I talked about it all through the Show Will Go On webinar series. I'm going to reiterate it now. You need to be focused on your runway. And then finally, for 2021, continue to exercise strategic pessimism. I know many of you label yourselves as optimists, and that's good for you. I'm a cynical optimist. I believe everything's going to turn out great. We're just going to have to go through hell to get there. Exercise strategic pessimism. Plan for at least 2 more years of pandemic shenanigans, whatever that might be. Plan for 2 years and you might be pleasantly surprised. Okay. And I hope you're pleasantly surprised. because if we keep doing what we're doing, we've got a solid 2 more years of shenanigans going on. 2 more things I want to share with you. One is the case for diversification. Okay. I talked earlier about having different lines of business. For every line of business you have, think about where the buying decision is made. Who is that customer? And then what matters more to the customer for that line of business? So if you have a line of business, which is rental, who's the rental customer? What matters the most to them? Okay. Is rental the most important thing to them right now? Or is something else? Lead with the thing that's most important. And this is in response to people who've taken their streaming business or their platform business and they've buried it underneath their show model. We're still a show company. We're still going to do live events. How big is your audience? Oh, you don't have one yet. Well, we're here for you for your audience. Oh, you want to do some streaming? Okay. Right now, your customer, remember where I said focus on your customer, has a streaming event that they think is really important. If you lead with something that's not important to them, you're going to lose the sale. You're going to devalue whatever it is that you sell. Okay. Lead with what's most important to that customer. Right now, for many of you, if you're in the streaming, if your events business is now live streaming, lead with it. Okay. That's what your customers are looking for. And of course, don't ever factor in sunk costs. Well, we have all this rental inventory. Of course, I want to keep my rental manager and the rental team in case that comes back. That's money that can't be recovered. Focus on what's going to happen in the future. What do you think is going to happen? Do you want to make money in that world? Great. What are the things that are going to help you make money? Again, this is the strategy conversation. And the last thing I want to share with you is the hierarchy of streaming event needs. Because you do not have to be the prime contractor on a streaming event to fit in to this hierarchy. You fit in wherever it makes sense. Figure out who your customer needs to be. You market to that customer. The most important thing in the streaming event world is the platform. That is the venue. If you own the platform and you are selling a platform, you're selling a venue. Okay? You are helping the meeting or event planner determine where they're going to bring their audience to get the experience they want them to have. Okay? You're a hotel, you're a convention center, you're a winery. That is your platform. That is the most important thing in the hierarchy of streaming needs. Once we've chosen the platform, the venue, then we can talk about how do we make the audience experience what they want. We've all done it. Client hires a giant ballroom. The first thing we do is we walk in and we cover up all of the walls and we change all the lighting, because we want a different audience experience than the stock offering from the venue, right? And then comes content and programming. And then the planning and the execution, and which is where most of us have been living for the past decade, is the planning and execution. And below that is the team and skills. And then finally, the hardware or the facilities or the infrastructure, the project management of your business, the packages, the kits. Okay, that is the least important thing in all of streaming. Your studio, I'm sorry to say, is the least important thing in the value chain of streaming events needs. Don't lead with your studio. Lead with your platform. Talk about the audience experience. Help your client with the content and the programming. Help them with the overall execution and management of the event. Introduce team members and skills where it's necessary. And oh, by the way, you're going to get to use some of your hardware. Yay. All right. So I'm going to hang around because we're going to answer some questions, of course. So feel free to post any questions you have. Yeah, the airline analogy is back, Craig. I'll never get away from that. Restaurants and airlines, we'll keep talking about it. So feel free. I'm having trouble keeping up with the chat. It's not that big of a chat today, but my screen management is not all it should be today. Questions and Q&A. And let's talk about all this, because I know this is the big stuff. I know this is probably a little intimidating for some of you, and you're wondering how that affects your business. Don't hesitate to ask that question. If you're a freelancer and you're having trouble figuring out where you fit in this, don't hesitate to ask that question. Ask it in the Q&A because you can ask it anonymously. Nobody gets to see who asks there in Q&A. If I know who you are, I'm not going to call you out. I'm going to answer the question that you need answered because there's other people just like you. So please ask those questions. Now, in the meantime, while I fight with my computer, let's connect. I'm a pretty damn good advisor. I'm pretty damn good at strategy. I understand process. I'm a good coach. I help a lot of people. If you think that we might be able to work together, have an introductory call. Just schedule a call with me. We'll take 20 minutes. Help me understand where you're at, what your goals are, a little bit of your background. I'll tell you how I work with folks like you and how I might be able to help you. Let's see if we're a good fit, see if we can work together. And you might get a solution to a very valuable problem that you're dealing with right now. It's a free call. Let's talk. I'm not going to do a big sales pitch. I'm going to let you know what would be appropriate for you and if I can be of any service to you at all. Now, next month, 10 must-dos, 10 things that you've got to do to prep for 2021. I'm going to be very tactical here. We're going to get down into the weeds a little bit to satisfy that need because I know how you are. Wednesday, December 16th. If you've registered for this webinar, if you're watching this because you registered, okay, then you're already registered for next month's webinar. Feel free to share this with friends. The more the merrier. Bring them all on. Keep the questions coming, please. Quick summary. Being strategic means figuring out how to move forward in spite of all the obstacles that are in front of you. And there's plenty of them, but we're going to move forward anyway. And I'm going to help you any way that I can. If rental-based events, wherever you fit into a rental-based event, if those don't rebound until 2023, what are you going to do to survive? How are you going to live your life differently if the thing you're waiting for is now another year or 2 years away? And then for everyone, maintain those overhead reductions. Focus on being nimble. Do not take on any extra burden if you can avoid it. Build a strong outsource bench. Yay, gig workers. Support your gig worker community. They're going to make or break us, right? So with all that, let's do some questions. So what is the best platform that allows for general sessions, breakouts, and virtual exhibit booths? If anybody wants to drop that answer into the chat, I'm not going to give you an answer. It's the one that you research that connects well with you, that seems to be something that you can resell. They are changing every day. The platforms that were the go-to platforms in July are now, in the past, and there's new platforms out there. So do your research. But if anybody wants to help Roger out in the chat saying what you feel is the best platform for general sessions, breakouts, and virtual exhibit booths, drop it in there. We'd love to hear from you. Also recommend that you get over on Intentional Success Network and see if you can get that conversation going over there. It's a good question. I'm not the right guy to answer it. Another question, should I be selling my rental gear now? All right. That's an honest question. Yes and no. For certain types of gear that are not going to be relevant for a long time, or by the time that business is relevant again, that gear is not going to matter. Yeah, now is probably the time to sell it. You know what I'm talking about. If you have high-end event production gear, video projectors, and things like that, studio cameras, which don't really help you in your current studios, yeah, I might get rid of that. Big sound systems. If I have excess sound systems, or I've got the 10-year-old line array and the 2-year-old line array, sell the old one, right? There's some things that you can probably get rid of. If you have some gear that was already a little long in the tooth, it's going to be really useless in 2 years. Sell it while you can get some money for it. How you go about selling it is a longer discussion because there's liquidation options. There's selling it a piece at a time. It's go finding your own hidden market somewhere. Maybe you've got a secret funnel of equipment that can go to some other country. I don't know. It is a sunk cost. It will free up space so that you can use your warehouse space for something else, or you can downsize your rental footprint, your leasing real estate footprint. It is cash in hand, even though it may not be the cash you hoped for. But yeah, if you think that selling equipment is in your future, it would be smarter to do it now than later, because I think the market's going to get more and more flooded, of course. Yeah, how long should our runway be? Again, another great question. The standard business, the business coach advisor's rule of thumb on this is that you should have 6 months of operating money. In other words, you should be able to operate for 6 months without any income. And that's how long your runway should be. That's how much cash you should have in your runway. So your revenue could stop and you can go at least 6 months. I think given our experience this year, I might want to extend that to a year. So I might want to be aggressively looking at the profit that we take in, and rather than reinvest it or expanding it, act more conservatively, sock more of it away, build up a larger and larger nest egg. And then after that, any excess cash could be used for strategic investment. Obviously, there's other ways to go about how much of, if I made $10,000 this month, how much of it needs to go into runway and how much of it needs to go into strategic investment. That's a question that only you can answer for yourself. There is a ratio that probably makes sense. When I'm working with my clients, we will sit down and look at the financials in order to accurately answer the question. There is a way to calculate what's an appropriate runway for your business. So great question. Okay, as we move through this, there are opportunities beginning to present to acquire. Let me rephrase this. I think this was a question. What's your advice about acquisitions? Okay, there are previously robust companies at bargain prices, and that is probably true. They're selling at multipliers that are less than what they were selling at before, or certainly what they're multiplying against is less. What's your advice for acquisitions? My advice for acquisitions is always the same. 1 + 1 has to equal 3. Okay, so if I acquire another company for $1 and I'm worth $1, together we better be worth $3. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, because you're going to lose. Every acquisition immediately loses value after the acquisition. It's like when you drive the car off the lot, brand new car, and all of a sudden, you're 0.2 of a mile down the road and its value just dropped 10%. Acquisitions are the same way. So if you're looking at acquisitions, you're buying future earnings, okay, or you're buying assets. Okay, right now, assets are not worth a lot because our assets are not working. There's not a lot of future earnings for our assets. But if you're doing something strategic that's going to give you future earnings, you have value. And I have some bigger thoughts on what's going to happen to our M&A world over the next year in particular, and then going forward after that, because with the de-emphasis on hardware, it changes the whole balance sheet dynamic of our industry, which is going to really change the outlook for the M&A business. Next question. I'm hesitant to go all in on streaming because I feel that in the past 6 months it's gotten easier to execute, so much to the point that my kids are teaching me how to do something for free that I just charged $15,000 for. That's nice to hear. So this is a comment, and I get it. Okay, there's a lot of saturation of knowledge in the streaming market, and a lot of customers just need better Zoom. Okay, however, I'm dealing, and I kid you not, I have clients who are doing 7 figures in streaming per month. Okay, I have clients who have replaced 50% of their 2019 revenue. Their run rate now is 50% of that revenue. Okay, at much higher margins, and they have downsized tremendously. Okay, there is demand pent up out there. Not everybody's exposure to the potential of streaming events and streaming buyers is the same. And many of the people who are concerned, as this commenter is concerned, and I understand the concern, is because they are not exposed to the type of streaming events that represent the future of our business. Their clientele, they haven't found themselves new clientele their old clientele is not doing this stuff in any significant way, or certainly in a way that's going to let you make a lot of money. If you're going to do streaming business, if you're going to focus on that, your client list just changed. Okay? A lot of your old clients are not going to buy from you. You're going to have to go out there and find new clients, and they're out there and they're hungry, and they're not as price sensitive as you might think. But again, strategy is engineering what you want to happen based on what you think will happen. You need to make a strategic choice based on what you think is going to happen. And if you think that the market's going to be saturated and everybody's going to be a price shopper, then you need to run your business accordingly. I don't believe that personally that is what's going to happen. I actually think the value of what we do is going to increase because demand is going up and supply is low. There's a limited amount of supply for streaming services. There's an almost infinite amount of supply for equipment and people to run it and push stuff into ballrooms. Okay? That is the commodity. Streaming is not a commodity. You can do it better. Now, let's see, another one here. Watch your time. We're almost out of time here. Our ability to scale is hindered by everyone having their own custom solution. Accessing freelancers who are familiar with our solution is hard because company B, C, and D, and E all do it their own way. We all divide up the technical roles slightly differently. Have you seen any standard set of roles beginning to emerge on streaming studio events? Yes and no, but what you're describing is exactly what companies used to say to the freelance market. I used to run a staffing company. I put freelancers out on the field back in the 80s and the 90s. Every corporate event staging company that came to Dallas to do a show hired my people, and every one of them did a show differently. The guys from California did it one way. The guys from New York did it another way. The guys from Atlanta did it another way. Everybody did it differently. Okay? The fact is, if your solution is so custom that nobody outside of your company can adapt to it, you've over-engineered your solution. You're going to get left behind. Okay? Start talking to people outside, finding out how other people are doing it. It is not that different. You know, the difference between working in OBS or vMix is not that big. And the fact is there's plenty of people who do both or one or the other. So different platforms. Programming is not just programming as you're programming for a platform. Okay, you're going to have to develop the gig workers that you need. They are going to be more valuable. So the more proprietary your process, the more expensive your gig workers are going to be. And you're going to have to pay them more in order for them to be available. Okay, because everybody else figures out how to do it the same way and make it easy and add their own secret sauce and how they manage the event, how they put that final finish on it. You're going to get left behind. So figure out what's wrong with your process that it is not familiar enough for people to learn and pick up on. And at the very least, you're going to have to develop your gig workers to work inside of your system. It is not optional. You don't really have a choice other than hiring more people, which is adding overhead for an unreliable forecast. So thank you for sharing that comment and question. Tom, your projected timelines for vaccines to be distributed nationwide seems to show a pretty slow rollout. How do you arrive at the number of months quoted? All right, so we've got two different competing vaccines. One of them requires that it be kept at a temperature that is like -40 degrees Celsius. It's going to be very, very hard to distribute. The other one can be kept in normal freezer environments and then refrigerated for up to 30 days. But again, we have a distribution problem. We can't even get testing done nationwide. We're talking about rolling out a 2-dose vaccine. So getting 1 dose out is meaningless. It's going to take 2 doses. And the time between those doses is not clear. The availability of the supply is not clear. And it's not going to be equally available for everybody across the country all at the same time. This is going to be, pardon my expression, this is going to be a shit show. We're not good at this. The world is not good at this. It's going to take a while. So that's how I'm that's why I'm projecting it. I'm reading a lot on this because, one, I find it very interesting, and the public positioning on how quickly this can be done versus what's being said inside of the epidemiological community is quite a bit different. So I am not an expert, and do your own research. And I see one last question, so I'm going to squeeze it in here. Associations have been offering streaming services to the exhibitors. What are your thoughts on how do we as AV companies compete or fit in? Well, associations can offer streaming services, and who's going to do that for them? All right. So associations have been providing the venue. I know AVIXA is an association. They provide the Infocom venue for exhibitors to exhibit at Infocom. They're going to provide a platform to do that. You know who they hired to help make that platform work? AV people. All right. So that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It may not work for you if all you're getting out of an expo is rentals on the floor. There's not a lot of work for you in there. However, you've got to move up the food chain and sell somebody a little bit higher up, and there is work to be done there. It's not going to replace the work that you had before. So yeah, associations, which are event producers, are going to offer streaming services, and they're going to need to outsource help to do that because they are not doing that year round. So figure out how to get in on that gravy train. So that's it. That's all I got for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like we're getting a little bit of the energy back as these months go on, because there's a lot of exciting things that can happen for us. And it is a little scary and trepidatious. So stick with me. I'll be back next month. In the meantime, join me over on Intentional Success Network. If you got questions, it's a great place to go post them. You can chat directly with me there, post something and ask Tom. You guys are welcome to shoot me an email. I'll answer as best I can. And if you would like to talk about doing business together, schedule an intro call or just ping me. I'll set up a call for us and we can see how we can help each other out. So thank you. Have a great rest of your week.